Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the track two of Big Data Days 2023. My name is John. I am your host for this track two. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Faisal Khan, who is the VP of Strategy and Insights working with Sila. He is here today to share with us a little bit of his thought leadership on this thing called big data for consumer insights. And it will be an interesting one, I hope. Faisal, thank you for joining us again today.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. Looking forward to the next 45 minutes.
Excellent. So I'm going to hand over to you, Faisal, to
Sure.
take us through this interesting topic, hopefully to learn a little bit more from your thought leadership on this. Over to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, a very brief introduction about me so that there is some context to what I'm talking about. I've spent almost 2 decades in market research and consumer intelligence, working with the leading brands globally, locally, some giants on their marketing strategies, providing them with some of the best-in-class consumer intelligence, consumer insights, and what's running in the consumer's mind. I've always done that through traditional means, with Nielsen's of the world, Kantar's of the world, using methodologies like focus group discussions, like survey-based methodologies, face-to-face. But of course, the world has changed. We have access to technology. We have access to big data. We have artificial intelligence to make best use of that big data. And I'm at Sila, which is basically an Arabic native AI technology. It's basically disrupting the market research agencies, the market research industry per se, and where we believe that in today's day and age, there's really no need to go and ask people of their opinions, what they think, how they behave, because there is more than enough in the online world, millions of data points. So more on that when we as we progress. So talking about market research, consumer intelligence, it's a very old industry. It is dates back to more than a century, where there was this where the rise of TV came in, where commercialization took place, and in the 1920s when the first set of advertisements came out, and there was this interest that marketers at those days had that we're releasing advertisements, but do they have any impact? Are people liking it? Are people not liking it? If they're liking it, is that resulting in product purchases, or any kind of metrics that helps me understand whether it's doing something good for me or not? And that was when actually the introduction of market research was. And different methodologies came in play after that. But what's interesting, that it's been almost 100 years since the first questionnaire was launched by Daniel Starch back in the 1920s, that till a few years back, it was absolutely the same methodology being followed. And here's the entire industry, has been largely immune to the digital revolution. There's some article I took out where they talked about how the industry, such a huge industry of consumer intelligence, has lagged behind, and it was as vocal about calling it the tortoise in the race. So it was marketing was marketing was adopted technology very quickly, with a lot of digital advertising, with social media platforms, with basically everything was going digital in the world of marketing per se. As consumers, all of us, you and I are all consumers, we are heavily influenced by the reviews, the ratings we see online, the influencer marketing that we see, the digital advertising we see, how we are targeted. And there is the market research industry still wasn't tapping into all that information. They were still going with that paper pen to people and asking what how their day looks like, what are the products they're happy using, which shampoo are they using, why are they using, which shampoo they use, which soap are they using, what cereal are they having for breakfast. And that had to be challenged, especially with access to the data that's there today. And it's never too late. Organizations like Zilla, like multiple other organizations, were here trying to push the envelope, trying to challenge the the traditional ways of doing things, the traditional ways of gathering information on consumers, how consumers feel, think, behave. And where does that, how do you challenge that? Where does that all come from? It's all big data that's available today. And I'm going to spend some time on this. And I think all of us as consumers, also, at the end of the day, we all are consumers, can relate to this. And in today's day and age, we don't go online, we live online. We post content, things we like, opinions we share. We go on Amazons of the world, share our reviews, give our ratings. We'll go on a Make My Trip after a trip we went to, and we'll kind of give a rating to the hotel. If we liked a certain staff member, we'll give him good reviews. We'll specifically mention the staff member. We follow brands, we follow influencers. We are followed by people. We like content. We go on Google and search. I'm interested to buy a new car. I'm going to go and search online. What are the new cars available? Which electric vehicles are great to buy? All this is consumer data, and this data is accessible. This data runs into millions of data points. All this collectively, it's a lot of data, or to simply say, it's big data. And all this data is very useful and is of high quality. And there are 4 A's that we call, and we've kind of come up with this as an organization, that why is this so powerful? Why is this big data that is accessible, consumer data that is accessible, so important as an tool for decision making, whether that's launching new products, whether that's pricing strategies, whether that is how people shop, packaging inputs. It's because the first A, authentic. All this data is behavioral. It is ambient data, like we say. We are not asking anyone. This cannot be challenged, right? So it's the conversation I'm having on social media. It's the review I'm giving, the rating I'm giving from a first-hand experience, because no one's asked me to do it, but I'm doing it on my own, out of my will. It's the Google search I'm doing for a certain brand, for a certain category. It's who I'm following. I cannot lie about who I'm following. There are certain affinities as an individual, as a consumer I have. So if I've got an interest in cars, I'll probably following some car brands, some automobile brands, some car influencers. If I'm interested in technology, I'll be participating in, following some kind of conferences or some kind of brands or influencers against on the technology front. And all this data can be accessed at a collective level and with no element of bias. Vis-a-vis what? Vis-a-vis going and asking someone what they like, how they behave, what they did. There's heavy dependence on claim data. There's heavy dependence on memory. And this addresses all those issues. And there's absolutely no element of bias. It's just very real data that's out there waiting to be used. 2, accuracy. We're not talking about 600 people. We're not talking about 8 people. I have seen, and myself being from the traditional, like I said, I've seen all phases of market research, consumer intelligence. I've helped brands take the most strategic decisions just based on the opinion of, let's say, 3 focus group discussions. That's 24 people. That runs a big risk, whether how accurate it is that. How representative is that of the larger digital audience, the audience per se? And with big data, that reassurance you have, because it is at such a large scale, there's absolutely no chance of going wrong there. It is going to be the true sentiment, the true how your consumers think, feel, and do. The third is accessibility. It's very interesting because, and I think this is very powerful, because today AI allows me to access that big data historically. So if I'm doing a consumer behavior understanding, let's say if I'm a hotel and I want to understand the behavioral change pre-COVID or post-COVID, because my travel habits have changed, or let's say if I'm an airlines brand or anything to do with the hospitality industry, which had a huge impact because of COVID. And I want to see how behaviors have changed post-COVID. What AI today allows you to do, or what is access, go to history, let's say 2018, pre-COVID time, look at behaviors, access behaviors at that point in time. Fast forward 2023, look at case point in time behavior, real time behavior, and understand how those aspects have changed. Right? So this data, the big data we refer to, with the power of AI, you're able to kind of see the full trend, or able to understand how things are changing or how behaviors are changing, how attitudes are changing, whether that's related to anything. No, that's this is an example of on the right left hand side that you see, a simple example of share of search is basically how many people are going online on Google to search for the brand Alpro, Koita, Oatly, Scotty, and you're able to see that over a period of time till today, and see where what is kind of, how is the behavior is changing. And this is just simple search behavior. The fourth one is automation, and this is a very interesting one. I can go on and on, but I won't spend too much time. It's I don't want to fall in that trap, but it's really about how it's really changing the game. So of course, with AI advancements, data collection was automated, data cleaning was automated, analysis was automated, visualization was automated, and with all the recent buzz in the last 4 months, 6 months, 3 months, around OpenAI, around ChatGPT, now inferring insights, data storytelling, and also recommendations of what you do are all automated. So you're inserting, you have big data, you're able to insert that data on, let's say, any of the OpenAI's, ChatGPT. You're able to, the ChatGPT is able to understand that data, absorb that data, infer that data, and also give you recommendations of how you kind of use that data. And conceptually, everything can, an entire research project, an entire consumer insights project from start to finish can be done at a very less time with all the automations possible across the spectrum, from starting from data collection to delivery of to recommendations and what you do from a strategic perspective. So that's more theoretical in terms of the power of big data when it comes to consumer intelligence and market research, and how it can be used. Here are some use cases. I'm talking about 4 broad use cases, and I'll deep dive into a real time example, the first one, which is segmentation. But to broadly tell you, how can I use this big data, and and how can I leverage the power of artificial intelligence on this big data from a very commercial standpoint, from a marketing perspective, from an innovation perspective. Segmentation is, there is so much spends that are happening digitally. So brands, the biggest brands of the world, are advertising online. They're engaging with influencers. They're advertising across social platforms, outside of social platforms, and there's a lot of transitioning from mass media to digital media. But how do I know if I am spending, how right is my how right is that investment I'm doing? Where do I actually invest? Am I supposed to invest hypothetically on a TikTok, or am I supposed to invest on an Instagram? Should it be a reel? Should it be a picture? And who do I mean, there's everyone out there sitting on the digital world. Who do I target? And exercise like segmentation helps you understand your audiences, their behaviors, and I'll talk about this example, a real-time example that gives you more understanding, where it helps you understand and maximize your ROIs. Digital brand equity is another use case where you want to understand, what is my brand health, what is my brand equity as a brand, how do I compare with competition, and that kind of constantly tells you how well you're being able to manage perceptions of your brand, and how healthy is your brand. Customer experiences, we're the first ones to go on Twitter, complain about our banking transaction, about the money we transferred and did not receive. All that is data, helps a lot in consumer experience, customer experience, right from any category you could think about, service sector. And again, that data is very helpful to improve your standards and KPIs around customer journeys. Trends and topics, especially for new product innovations. I want to launch a new plant-based milk. Should I launch it or not? Where's the conversation headed? Are people interested or not? Or anything else? But it's really about identifying what are the trends, and where do I head, or how do I be ready with my strategy, whether that's from a new product development perspective, whether that's from a marketing perspective, whether that's a pricing perspective, whether that's a packaging perspective. So those, and there are many more use cases. from a commercial marketing perspective. I'm going to be talking about segmentation in specific, just to kind of bring to life how does big data, how is this big data can actually be used in some heavy lifting around your strategies, marketing strategies, digital marketing strategies, and how, what is the process like? How do you use that? How do you identify that big data? How do you use that big data? And this kind of case study touches upon it. So this is a case study on digital audience segmentation, and the business challenge here was, as an organization, uh, not us, but this is what one of the leading brands globally, which wanted to understand how do they plan their entire digital marketing strategy. Who do I reach out to? How do I reach out to? Where do I reach out to them? Which social platform should I connect with them? With what should be my messaging tonality? With what product repertoire of mine should I reach out to them? At what time should I reach out to them? And there were a lot of questions, and there was absolutely no means through any traditional way. They had some traditional approaches, segmentation exercises done to be able to understand who their consumers are, but none of them were applicable or could be implemented on their strategy. So yeah, we with big data, we were able to identify a huge sample to be able to design or give them inputs to be able to design an entire strategy around. And I'm going to show you some outputs around that. But before I do show you the outputs, what is the procedure? The first 3 slides are going to help you understand how you kind of go about that. So you see in life a real life example in terms of what is the process of being able to do this. How are you making best use of big data? So first, of course, you identify your data sources. In this case, for strategic reasons, it was the social media platforms, which was Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the 4 big ones. You identify the audience within that. This was for one of the leading food brands, cooking brands. So there was you needed to identify not the general audience, but within the social platforms, people who are interested in cooking. There was a certain filters that were required. There were certain markets of interest, certain age bands of interest. So you kind of filter them. Again, you use demographic, again, AI to be able to filter them. And then you kind of move on to other procedures. I will break this 6 steps into 3 each for a better understanding. The first 3 is what I was talking about. It's about your data sources, identifying the audience, and filtering. So we started extremely large with hundreds and thousands of people, but then we kind of used a funnel approach to identify an audience that was interested in cooking. Within that, I filter down to a certain gender, a specific age profile, specific markets of interest. So you use demographic models, you use geographic tagging and other models to be able to identify this consumer profile. And with all that, we were able to identify 125,000, or specifically 124,895 individuals, unique consumers on which the analysis was based, which is a hugely representative sample. What you do once we identified these people of 125,000 people, 125,000 people, you're able to capture the profiles. When I say profiles, they're bios. So as users of social media, you would have a bio on Instagram, maybe with your country of residence flag tag, maybe with your interest, passions, maybe your name. So every different people have different ways of putting their bio. Some are empty, some have some information, but you have access to that profiles of people. For all those profiles of people, you have access to historical posts. So once a profile that becomes a source of information for all these 125,000 people, you have historical posts that take you to the history, the last 6 months, the last 8 months, the last 1 year post, to be able to understand consumers at large with a better understanding. And then on those, all that data that we collected and landed up to almost 3.65 million data points. It was huge data. And you run segmentation iterations based on commonalities. So there was algorithms, customized algorithms, where you're identifying based on all the behaviors that were captured to identify segments of people that can be clubbed based on certain similar characteristics. The next few slides actually show you some output slides. So you've got here, an arrival of the actual 5 segments. So based on the segmentation process, the iterative process, those 125,000 people were identified as five smaller clusters representing five common clusters, which are which differentiate them on certain characteristics. And we've kind of have a significant base on each of those clusters of audience, and a targeting approach, that how does a marketing agency use this data for each cluster. So, and which clusters do I target? So when I'm doing my digital marketing strategy, or when an organization is doing a digital marketing strategy, which clusters do I target? Which ones have most revenue associated with them from a perspective of sheer size? Which ones are growing, declining? What are their behaviors? How do I target them? Because for each one of them, there's an understanding associated. And again, I'll show you some outputs that give you a better understanding. But before I talk about each of the segments, or what is the understanding we were able to capture, there's another interesting analysis we were able to do, again with the power of AI, is look at how these segment sizes are changing. And there were some interesting insights, because that has a huge implication on who do you target, and how much longevity that audience has for you from a strategic perspective. And I'll give you an example. The smallest segment, and these are just two examples I'll give you, which I thought was very powerful and had huge implications from a strategic perspective. The first example is, there was this segment which was the smallest one. Here, if I go behind, the segment size was 13%. So out of all the people, the segment is 13%. But what we did with historic data, you're able to go behind a year, 2 years, run that exercise again to be able to see in 2020, in 2021, what was the size of the segment. Case in point, what is the segment size now? And if the same trend continues, what is the segment size likely to be? So the smallest segment happened to be the fastest growing segment also. So what is ranked as fifth today in terms of size of audience is likely to crawl up to position number 2 or position number 3 2 years down the line. The other example is just right below it, which is the traditional conformists. We've just named them based on certain characteristics that define them best. But of course, there's a lot of information behind each one of them that goes. But that is the biggest segment in case in point, current point in time. But it has also happened to be the fastest declining segment. So that segment of people, demographically, attitudinally, however they're defined, is also the fastest declining. If I were to do a study just point in time, I would have probably spent all my money on this segment, saying, hey, this is the biggest segment. But because AI allows you for historic access of data and able to kind of see a trend, it was not the priority segment, because I know, as a matter of fact, that today this is the largest segment, but I also know from data and insights and AI that this is also the fastest declining segment, and it's going to be an irrelevant segment to target or to address 2 years down the line. And hence my entire strategy changes around it. These are some outputs just to kind of show you what kind of information you're able to bring from all this big data and using artificial intelligence. But you can understand for each of the segments, you can understand their digital behaviors. So, what platforms they are on. Is it more than the average of that, let's say, country or demographic profile? Is it lower? So exactly which platforms to target them on. The content they're posting online. You're able to create a heat map of a 24/7 and seeing at a segment level, if you want to target them, they are most active on this day at this time of the day. These times, on these days, on these timings, they're not active. So if you want, you exactly know where to reach them and when to reach them. 2 category behaviors. This specific example, of course, is related to cooking. So there was a lot of interest in what are the top dishes, what are the cuisines of interest. So the left-hand slide kind of tells them their interest in, what kind of food or cuisines they're most interested in. The right-hand side tells you within each of those cuisine, what are the top recipes they're talking about and interested in. And you're able to also, for the cuisines, again, look at a historic trending to be able to understand. So I have a very good understanding of, what are the dishes they're cooking. I can use these dishes in my communication strategy. I can create products around it because I know what they need, what they're eating, what their preferences are. So the first bit of information was around their digital behaviors. So I know where to target them, when to target them. My category behaviors allow me to, with what products do I target them with, what do I talk about, what do I show in my communication. And then you also can do a literal count of influencers. So it's almost like a frequency check collectively. Let's say if there's a segment X I'm studying, which is a 40,000 size segment, for those 40,000 at a consolidated level, there's a model that allows you to count the influencers they're following and the top frequency influencers. So if you have to engage with influencers, which influencers should you engage with and they're most interested in. You can do demographic profiles, market representation, nationalities, language, age. So there's a lot of possibilities around in terms of what's possible in terms of demographic profiles and capturing attitudinal information. So this kind of gives a very broad perspective of the possibilities around how AI and big data is disrupting a century-old large industry, and how you're able to kind of use it. And with this example, you can see in terms of the power it brings to you in terms of a use case. So that's pretty much sums up I did not want to overwhelm you with too much, but that kind of sums up how big data is used in the world of consumer insights and how it's really disrupting and redefining an entire century-old industry of market research.
Thank you, Faisal, for that very detailed, insightful sharing on how you could apply big data, with doing that so-called breakdown. Because in the early part of my career, I actually was working for this company called, this market research company in particular called Nielsen. At that time, I was a young chap. I just didn't see the potential of all this. If I stayed in that company, I would have adopted what you have just explained. It's just fascinating, Faisal. Seriously, it's a totally new world out there nowadays. Looking back when I started my career, then
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Right. We have some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to just post them and then project the question out, and then perhaps I'll read that out to you. Faisal, you can help us to help our audience. This is actually from one of our anonymous so-called audience. The question is it difficult to transfer from a non-automated to an automated process in data analysis? I think they are doing it manually at this point in time, if I understand the question. So they are trying to get your so-called thoughts to appreciate how do we actually do it to make it more automated in that sense. Yeah, over to you.
It's not difficult to transfer. Of course, technology is an enabler.
Right.
We often have access to so a lot of research we get we have access to what I was talking about, let's say online data, but let's say there's a lot of time we have first party data. So let's say there's a hotel chain, hypothetically there's Intercontinental, who has globally has 1 million reviews from people, and they want to analyze that, which is in usual cases, let's say sitting on some Excel or something, Technology then kind of allows you to input that data to be able to automate the process, and then that can be it's basically technology. So the simple answer to that question is it's easy if there's an access to a technology that does that. So with the ability of a technology, it doesn't take time, and that's we do that with organizations. We are aware that a lot of our organizations are sitting on a lot of data that are sitting in various even as basic as just in Excel,
or even in an Access database somewhere or SQL somewhere, right? But I think the challenges with those data are spread across the organization, right? Because in the last organization I used to work for, we always had this challenge that it's not about the data, finding them. I think it's to really clean it up properly so we can actually ingest it or into the models, because I think that takes a lot of our effort as well. Faisal, how do you actually suggest?
Cleaning is I think bigger. So cleaning, of course, is a challenge always. Cleaning is always a challenge, but to an extent that's been automated also. But I think one point worthy of mentioning, and I'm picking it up from what you said, while I said that data transferring is easy, but I have also had situations where the data is not exportable. It is in a format that is not. It is currently using a platform where that data is non-transferable to, let's say, or non-exportable to a format that can be used by a certain technology.
Absolutely.
So there have been situations that you would face. So as far as that data is exportable.
Uh-huh.
It's an easy process, but it needs to be in a format that's exportable. There are systems that organizations have where the data is not exportable.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, I think locally in Malaysia, there is a requirement to keep the records for 7 years, and then a lot of times when you want to do an audit or you request for a piece of information, they say, "Yep, we have it, John. It's actually in the warehouse." And I'm like, "Okay, wow, what warehouse?" They say, "Oh, it's in a box." So I'm like, "Okay." So how long is it going to take us to locate that box and to find that, say, piece of invoice that that we needed for the finance
And
team?
yeah,
You
and
know.
the cleaning process, you're right, the data quality, because there is often inconsistencies. So we will never commit to any research based on first party data till we've reviewed the data to,
Right,
one, check the exportability of the data,
right.
two, to check how consistent is the data, because how much diligence has gone behind creating that data, because if there's a
Agreed.
lot of information, if in a set of data there's half information, in the other set of data there's the other half of the information,
Yeah.
then it's just
It,
but if those are tick mark, if everything's exportable, it's cleanly, it's a good database they've maintained, then it's exportable, then it's very easy to do that.
yeah, I think that's one of the challenges a lot of organizations have. I mean, the one that I used to work for previously, or even some organizations that we talked to today, they normally need to, I think, like you said, get that ready first before we
Right.
can get people like yourself come in and give some guidance. Now, guys, this is what we can do for you. Here is how we're going to transform that data to give you that insight, how you can actually really, spend some
Yep.
investment on it, things like that. Right, let's get to the next question here. Let me just project it out. The next question is from another attendee as well. It's also anonymous. The question is, when using big data from, for example, the social media, right? So we mentioned just now we extracted from Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and all that, right? Is this data already in a structured and usable format? I think that's the first question. The second question is, who handles the labeling and the structuring of the unstructured data? Because I think there's a lot of different metadata or different tags that we can apply, right? So Faisal,
Yes.
over to you to help our audience out on this one.
So, like most cases, the data is unstructured.
Right.
So any data that we, especially, let's say if we're just talking about NLP or text-based data, so a lot of this data is, let's say, text-based data.
Yep.
All that data will be unstructured in nature. And of course, that's where the data science team, the experts, the technical team comes at play, right from the collection to running the process to be able to structure that data. So the first response to that is it's unstructured. It
Yep.
cannot be used as is. The response to the second part of the question is the entire data science technology team, business intelligence team gets together to be able to, and of course with the help of, whenever I say this, there is of course technology at play at any given point in time.
Right.
So it's the technology. So just to also maybe I think just to kind of also bring it in context to the question, when I talk about all this data, it's behind the technology we have. So Scylla is an organization. So all the data you saw, all the presentations we work on, all the insights or consumer intelligence we extract, or structure to the unstructured data, right from the collection to cleaning it up to making it structured and making sense of it, is using the technology, AI technology called Scylla. It's an Arabic native technology, and why that's important is because where I come from, I'm based in Dubai.
Right.
We do a lot of work across the world, but a lot of work is done in the Arab region. And whoever's familiar with the Arab world, whether it's Africa, Middle East, Levant, etc., it's a very complex language structure.
It is.
Because every country has a different dialect. So if the Arabic used in Egypt is very different from the Arabic used in Dubai to very different from the Arabic used in Saudi. Of course, there are commonalities,
Right.
but at a dialect level, every country, every region is very different. And all that data that we capture, so the technology reads the data, reads the Arabic data, structures it into which dialect it comes from, because unless you're able to tag a dialect to it, you're not able to interpret that data, because the same sentence said in Egyptian Arabic and let's say in Saudi Arabic
Right.
might be interpreted in two very different ways. One can be a positive way of saying it, the other can be actually sarcasm. So all that data that you get is structured. So the technology allows you to collect all that data, tag it into the different dialects that we have in Arabic,
Mm.
and run an interpretation model based on whatever. So if it's a segmentation study, if it's a sentiment study, if it's an experience study, so kind of run models. So let's say demography,
Mm.
assigning demographics. So you want to understand who's saying this. So then we have demographic models, and the technology kind of runs the demographic model on that entire base to be able to say that this is the age, this is the gender, this is the country they're coming from. So yeah, so everywhere, of course, there's a technology that's at play at any given stage of an entire process that's there. But yeah, so when I say structured to so from unstructured to structured to usable to presentation format, there is people like me, the data science team, technology team, business intelligence team, but there's also the connecting thing between all of us is the technology itself.
I think what you're doing with this technology is amazing, Faisal, because I was just thinking about the say, because that's in Arabic, right? You already have 26 different dialects itself, right? So I can imagine if we magnify that, let's say in a country like China, there are 60 main dialects and 300 sub dialects. I speak one of the dialects called Hakka. My parents, right? My dad and my mom, they are both known as Hakka, but again, they speak different accent of, I should say, different sub dialects of Hakka itself. So I'm confused myself.
So you can relate to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can really understand and appreciate when you say in Arabic there's 26 dialects, right? Even I myself, my dad speaks a different type of it, and my mom speaks a different type. And when both of them refer to the same thing with a different terminology, I'm like, guys, seriously, I'm confused here. Can we use English?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think language is actually quite an interesting one when you have to make it from an unstructured way to a structured. It's the same locally in Malaysia, even the Bahasa Malaysia, between East and West Malaysia, we do have also different flavors. So yeah, I've not seen anybody work on that yet, but that'll be interesting. I think one day if we can get those unstructured data to be structured. Yeah. So this is we talk about languages, right? Right. Let's move on to the next question. We do have one last question here. Let me just put it in projection. So this is from Pasty. Pasty is asking, may I know what data source that we can use the AI tool to retrieve all this segment site? I mean, how do we actually connect it up?
Yeah, so these are all the work we do is all customized in nature, is bespoke in nature, and addresses specific business challenges. So the way we've designed it is identifying a business challenge, using that as a brief, and using the data source to be able to kind of seeing that. For different business challenges, your source of data might be different. So the example, for example, we saw in the use case, the case study, was for multiple reasons. Was social media platforms was a source, right? And also within the social media platforms, there were 4 social media platforms identified to be able to address because there was a certain usability of it. There have been situations where you might just use Google share of search data. So, for example, I am launching a electric vehicle, and I'm an electric vehicle brand, and I want to understand what we call as a share of search.
Yep.
So you will let's say identify 10 brands which are already into electric vehicles.
Yep.
And you will make that the category. So those 10 brands become the category, and you see what is that, how many people or how much quantum of searches are happening around the category, and what is the share of search of Tesla versus, let's say, a Volkswagen versus, let's say, a Nissan. And that is a very strong surrogate of market share. And then you can literally say that the biggest share of search is Tesla. That means the highest interest is in brand Tesla versus the rest. And one of the examples I was showing you of share of search was some plant-based milk. So you can literally have Google as one data point or as an input. You can have social media, you can have reviews. So you would want, and that's very common for hotels where they would just want to see the reviews and the ratings across the popular third-party travel platforms. So like Vigo, Make My Trip, Clear Trip, there are multiple in different countries, are different. the multiple sky scanner or whatever, so you can look at that. So your sources of data might kind of but again, we use our technology to be able to source that data and be able to analyze that data in whatever that meets the end objective of a specific study.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Just a follow-up question. I'm just curious, Faisal, when we tag on to those social media, right? How is that legal? I mean, I'm just curious.
No, it's a very valid
Twitter and all that. How do you tag onto that?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. It's a very common question, and I think no, we of course respect all. We work in the boundaries, and like most technology companies work in the boundaries of ethics, we do that too. So there are certain no-go areas. For example, we will never access, or we cannot, and we will never aim or attempt to access, let's say, Facebook private pages. So John's account, Patsy's account, Faisal's account, that is a no-go. Any Instagram account that is private, for example, so there in Instagram you have a choice of making your account public or private.
Otherwise, right? Yep.
Public account data is accessible, and a private account is not accessible. WhatsApp, of course, is out of question. It's very private. So Twitter is the most open source. So Twitter is something you have full access to. TikTok is somewhere you have full access to. But Facebook brand pages you can follow, public pages on Facebook, forums, everything is accessible. So of course, right from the source of data, there's a framework in place where you'll access information which is where you're allowed to access, and there's something that we call as private, so we'll not breach that private space. The second thing is no reporting, or even us, the analysis of any technology company does not have data at an individual level.
Right.
Okay. It is, so for example, if I'm doing a study on the 125,000 people, when the data is presented, used, it is anonymously for those 125,000 people.
Right. So
it is not
plans in a way, right, on the personal identifier.
It's at a collective level. There's no risk of breaching any kind of privacy. So it is not. So there is no individual data that we access to, or any technology access to, or provide to the end user of, let's say if it's for a marketing company or a brand. There is no individual, but it can identify, let's say I want to talk, the biggest segment is, let's say let's say it is of this nationality. It's expats. It is in the age band of 21 to 25 years old. They're mostly females. They're interested in, let's say, cars. They're interested in hanging out in XYZ mall. So at a collective level, you'll be able to give insights, but nothing is at an individual level.
Right. So that persona is being able to be shown to provide that insight as to why this specific group, like you mentioned, right? You can actually use AI to do that future projection. So when we make the investment, that will give the maximum return to the customer itself or to the client, right? So that you don't want to just invest what you see as the right so-called segment at this point in time. It's more of long-term planning. Well, thank you so much, Faisal. I think we're almost out of time. Thank you for sharing that very, very thoughtful, so-called very detailed way of how you guys actually do it. I'm really impressed in a way how you can able to drive the insight, especially like I said, the one that is actually what is to come in the future based on the trending and the way that you break down the persona of the groups. I think those really does add value. I mean, like I said, compared to my earlier so-called career when I started with Nielsen, right, the market research firm, I think this is a lot more different dimension that adds to the value when you do this kind of thing. Again, thank you, Faisal, for your time.
Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you very much.